It's right there. Thank you so much for that, Rosemary. It is not easy work. So we appreciate all of your efforts, and we thank you all for joining us today in our session. We are pleased that you are here. You chose to be with us this afternoon. Maybe we'll start with everyone with introductions before we do the slides show, and then spend some time in conversation together. So I guess I'll start. My name is Steve Batista. I am a counselor and program coordinator at Santa Ana College. I run our Center for Teacher Education. This is year 20 for me doing this work. I'm also on the ACTEP board, vice president, and happy to be here and happy to see a lot of familiar faces and meet new people as well. So, and then this is on my left is or where we are on the screen on my Brady Butch. Rosemary Wren is my colleague and partner in crime in this workshop.
Hi all, I'm Rosemary, and I am thrilled to be at the convening again. I got to be here last year. I'm a teacher educator at Cuesta College and also at Cal Poly SLO. And I am also writing my dissertation right now, not this minute, but in the process, and currently conducting a study on how white women teachers talk about race and how it influences their decisions on curriculum and pedagogy. And I identify as a white cisgender woman. My pronouns are she, her. And the reason for my scholarship is because as our keynote speaker talked about this morning, over 80% of teachers in America are white, and most of those are white women, and most of our students are not white. So we need to learn how to better prepare our teachers to navigate these spaces with cultures unlike their own, and so that we stop harming our students. I'll just say it that way. So that's my soapbox. Are we introducing everyone in the room? Or?
Yeah, that'd be great. Mm-hmm. I'll choose somebody, Megan.
I should go next, just because I'm also doing a dissertation, if that's okay. So my name is Brenda Placencia Carrizosa. I am a faculty member at Saddleback College in our Child Development and Education program, but I'm also a doctoral student, and my dissertation is on anti-bias education, and more specifically with teachers at the early ed level. So happy to be with you guys today. I learned about today at the last minute, so I actually missed your keynote, and this is my first session joining in. So I'm excited to hear what you guys have to share today. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
I'll go. I'm Megan Kaplinski. I'm ACTEP secretary, and I get to teach education and reading at Long Beach City College.
All right, I'll go and introduce myself. My name is Victoria Rio, and I am an education instructor at College of the Sequoias located in Visalia. And this is my second year as a full-time faculty member. So I am new to this, but I am also a first-generation student and a graduate of community college. So I really recognize the work and value that we're all doing together. So thanks for having me here. And Rosemary, I just support you in all that you're doing over there at Cal Poly. It's amazing work that needs to be happening. So.
I'll go. I'm Tracy Bird, and I teach in Child Development and Family Studies at City College of San Francisco. So many of you might know Kathy White. So I work closely with Kathy. I've worked with her for a few years. And so I do early childhood stuff. Special education is mostly what I do, and then some teacher prep as well. And I'm also glad to be here and grateful for this space. I really enjoyed the keynote. That was really powerful.
I'll go next. My name is Leticia Rojas. I am education faculty and Hickson teacher prep coordinator at Pasadena City College. And this is officially my second year full-time there. So I'm excited to join you all and be part of community. And since I'm, like many of you, I'm the only education faculty at PCC. So it's always good to talk to other folks who are in the same boat.
And I will go last. My name is Talia Trotterfield. I'm an adjunct counselor. I'm at Santiago Canyon College with the Pathways of Teaching program. And I'm also a faculty program coordinator for the Rancho Santiago Community College District for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, where we're focused on recruiting more people of color and students with, or not students, faculty and administrators that are LGBTQIA+ and in different areas like that, just to diversify the field.
Excellent. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to now share my screen and pull up our slide deck to help us kind of guide our conversation. And as I do that, I just wanted to, commiserate with both Rosemary and Brenda. I am, 83 days post dissertation defense. So still in the haze, but on the other side of it and cheering both of you on. I also did my work on Latinx aspiring K-12 teachers for beginning community college. So I'm glad that we're all adding to the scholarship of this work, which is really, really important for our discipline and for the work that we're doing. So keep it up. Who's next? Who's got next after us, right? All right, so this is our session, and basically I think at the next slide talks about our agenda. So really, I think we did the welcome and introductions. Our goal today is really to share strategies that promote the work that was laid out by our keynote speaker, that talk about, and we'll use a couple of colleges as basically as a jumping off point to share what we're doing. But the idea would then to be asking all of you what you've done or are doing or would like to do, and seeing if we can really try to build some common practices and strategies that will help us advance this work. So that's the idea. We'll start with Cuesta, Rosemary's work, and then my own work at Santa Ana College, and then some time for open sharing and discussion, and hopefully, creating some strategies and time together. Rosemary, you're next. You're up.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Is it okay if I share my screen? Or did you want to control it from there? Okay,
No,
so
go for it.
all right, I'm going to actually, before I even start, I want to apologize in advance for this not being more smoothly put together. I literally spent yesterday trying to get our Board of Trustees president to resign, and the rest of the week I've been writing resolutions and all sorts of stuff like that. So I'm sorry this isn't super slick. And so I guess I have to even find the slide. Just give me one moment, please, to find that slide. And we'll start with, I want to just see what I was going to talk about even. So there we go, sorry. All right, can you see the slide or?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so I want to just share with you a little bit about what goes on at Cuesta. We have 5 teacher pathways. I somehow am the lead of them all. I am a part-timer and didn't even know what I was getting into when I signed on, but here I am. And I've been there fully a year now in education. I also work in distance education and college success studies, so I'm constantly in learning mode. I told you a little bit about my research already. So we have about 1,200 people who've expressed interest in our teacher pathways. But right now we offer for the elementary education major, the ADT, we have 1 class, and that's Education 200, so Introduction to the Teaching Profession. However, we also have an early childhood pathway that until the education course came on board, that was how pre-service teachers made their way through Cuesta. So we still have a big emphasis on early childhood education. My background is in elementary ed, so I'm K-12 or K-8. So we now have our major, and we are slowly building out our education offerings. We will be offering introduction to paraprofessional and special education. And I just finished writing a proposal that social sciences is going to fight over, but ethnic studies for educators that we built around the current core competencies that are listed for the CSU, understanding that that's still up for debate, regardless of what area F element it may or may not meet. our students are asking for it and our students need it, as was evidenced from the keynote this morning and the research that all of us are doing. So we're slowly building out our program with degrees and certificates. We're super fortunate at Cuesta. Before I came, they managed to get $2.5 million grant from the federal government. So we have this Developing Hispanic Serving Institution loan grant that we are able to use for several of the things that I've listed here. We also have TPP grants, but this is huge. We have an embedded bilingual academic success coach who is like, we are really naughty together. We cause a lot of good trouble, but we also put on some really fun stuff. We also have a counselor, again, a bilingual counselor for our students to help them to be successful with their student educational plans. We have with this money also been putting on conferences. Last year we did a career night and a CBEST test prep workshop. This year so far, we did an anti-racist or social justice and racial equity and social justice in the classroom conference with a keynote and several breakout speakers. And then we took each of those breakout speakers and asked them to offer a coffee talk that we were, so they're more intimate. So it was our first big internet conference, so we kept it pretty basic, and everyone could only go to one of the 4 or 5 breakout sessions. So we offered those speakers later in the semester for students to connect with, and we were able to pay them a stipend because of the grant. We also have the CBEST test prep workshop that is evolving. We're considering eventually turning it into a non-credit course, but right now it's a semester. Until they get rid of the CBEST, we'll keep teaching it. And this year we added a deal where if they took the general workshop and at least one of the follow-up sessions, which we had were subject specific, once they took the exam and they showed us that they took it, they get a stipend. So again, we have this grant that provides us these resources, so we're using them. We also have a Canvas community shell that my partner in crime uses quite a bit to communicate with all of the people who are interested in teaching as a profession. And she and the counselor offer weekly wellness check-ins through the Canvas community. And that's been really good at that. They started that during the spring last year. We provide their textbooks. In the earlier breakout, I was talking about how I'm getting rid of the horrible textbooks that I have. And we're moving towards OER, but just haven't got entirely yet. But the grant does pay for the textbooks. And this semester, we're reimbursing transfer application fees for our students. So like I said, we're in a great position. But even if you don't have the cash on hand, these are things that we're finding, at least we don't have the quantitative data for it yet, but our students appreciate these things. So those are some of the bells and whistles. And then I was going to talk a little bit more about what happens in the classroom. And so I don't like textbooks, so I've always built my own curriculum. And so what I've done is with the Education 200 curriculum I was handed, and given a lot of leeway. So I'm really fortunate in that respect. I have literally, they start off the semester where I frame teaching in culturally sustained pedagogy. So from the very start, it's like that's normal. We think about these things. We invite students, friends of knowledge into the classroom. I model it and we discuss it intentionally throughout the semester. And I'm gonna actually get off of this screen and take you to, this is the first reading assignment in my class. And there's a couple things I wanted to point out on this page that I encourage you to consider as you're building your Canvas courses. And that is what's showing up in your pictures. So this is a total stock staged picture, but looking for images that you can use in your course that are representative of our students, of the students they might be teaching, and just setting the tone that way. Our students absolutely need to see themselves in the curriculum. And this is one simple way that a person like myself, who's used to seeing herself everywhere, wouldn't think about without trying. So I encourage us to think about just right off the bat, like this is their first education course. So let's just set this tone. Again, and rather than using a textbook, I have them read this interview with Django Paris about culturally sustaining pedagogies. And this was just out there, like, you know, it's on Ed Week, it's a blog, but it introduces them right out of the gate about what are these terms that they hear flopped around. And those of you who are not familiar with culturally sustaining pedagogy, I wasn't. One of my colleagues brought it up one day and I'm like, I got to find out more about that. It's basically an expansion on culturally relevant and culturally responsive pedagogy. And if you're worried about Gloria Ladson-Billings, who kind of came up with that in the first place, she's heartily endorsed this. So culturally sustaining pedagogy just is like the next step of sincerely weaving the cultures that your children bring to the classroom into what's going on. So this is just one way. And, you know, I talk about it with my students. I talk about, why did I pick this picture? You know, there's a million other pictures I could have chosen. And I talk to them about why this isn't in our textbook, because our textbook's written by a couple of white men who have some interesting views about single mothers and such. So that's something. And then also I bring into the conversation, how do children from different cultures or diverse learners, how might they respond to a situation? So one of my challenges is my disfavor with the words behavior management, because I like to think that, I mean, that's a very teacher-centered way of talking about the dynamic in a classroom. And so again, this is very early in my course. I'm not sure which module this is in, but again, I have them, this is not in a textbook. This is from management to engagement. Can't remember where I found it, but anyhow, it's an article where I bring that up right away. So we're not looking at kids from a deficit as something that needs to be fixed. How can we teach kids to make good decisions? And then again, trying to choose these images that represent our children. So those are just a couple of things that I feel like are pretty straightforward, that we can do without taxing our time or ourselves too much. I mean, I won't kid you, I put a lot of thought into my course design. It happens to be my cohort was in a course on technology right when COVID hit. And so our professor let us co-create the curriculum, which is good online pedagogy, and do our own research on what mattered. So we did that. And yeah, so I name race rather liberally. I use the words whiteness, I use the words white supremacy, not as just the Klan, but just as the way our systems are structured. I get a little pushback, but I just keep going because I've done the research. If someone wants to show me something else, I'd be happy to entertain it. Again, it's not my lived experience, but I'm seeing it in my students and I get it in their reflections. In their observation journals, when they watch their lessons each week, I ask them to consider how children from different backgrounds might experience that lesson and why they think that is. And then also I've been part of this. I've had the honor of working on our 21-day racial equity and social justice challenge. We started it, we did one in February and we read it. And you can see my computer hates me, but I embedded it in my class. And if you want to take advantage of this, anyone can access this. And what it is you just won't get the email because it won't be current. But basically each week we have a topic and then 3 challenges throughout the week. And like I said, I assign this to my students to do weekly reflections on and to relate it to education. This has been powerful. especially for my white students who have no context like me, who are learning this for some reason for the first time when they're 20 years old. And then also for my students of color who find a way to process some of the experiences that they've had throughout their experience. And these are, and the next slide, and then I'll be quiet. These are two comments from, but just to give you some idea of some of the things that struck me as we've done this challenge. This is from one of my Latina students. Oh, dang it, I hate when that happens. There we go. And I can't get this image out of my head, but it gave her a way of processing this situation of how, in context of colorism. And then the one on the bottom is from a white male student who didn't have an easy life, but understands his white privilege. And just by talking about this stuff, bringing it to people's awareness is affecting the way that they look at their students and they look at the world. So I'm going to be quiet now because I have no idea how much time I just took up, and I want to make sure we have, I guess, space to.
We have plenty of time. Yeah. Does anyone want to react, questions, share?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you so much for sharing those. I think it's super helpful to see really specific examples. And I started to do some similar things. I also have never liked textbooks, so I don't use textbooks. But I'm curious if for the 21-day challenge, we started this racial justice group in our department this summer, and one of the things we started working on was, I didn't know about Eddie Moore's until just now. So, but we started trying to work on that. So I'm just curious if you are open to sharing how you use it in your class. You said I know you said it's 3 weeks, but would you be open to sharing that like on Commons or something, like how you do it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really it's a library guide, so it's housed on our website. And we actually have our original one, and I will own that both of them are very white centric. And we've gone back and forth with it. The problem is the white people are the ones who need to know this stuff and have conveniently been allowed to not learn it. So I'm still not totally comfortable with how it affects my students of color. But it is what it is right now, and know that I'm not the only person driving it. I'm just a contributor. And so basically, when it's running, you sign up and you get a daily email and it tells you what the challenge is. But you can totally use it the way it is and just assign your students a week's worth of challenges at a time. And I mean, I can, if you want, I can show you what I'm talking about, if I can find it again.
That's helpful. I mean, I think that's obviously most of the change needs to happen. White people we need to be more aware and make the transformation happen, but it is a concern. I mean, I don't have very many white students. I have like 90 or probably, I don't know, about 90% students of color. So and even if I did, I mean, I'm concerned about how some of the stuff is oriented towards people who don't have experiences with people of other races, so. And that's also, some of my Asian students fall into that category too. Like they haven't had a lot of experience with African Americans, most of my Asian students. So I'm interested in providing that information, but I don't want to provide something for my African American students they're going to be like, yeah, duh, I mean, that's not giving me anything. That, it's a step better than asking them to, educate, but it's not that much better. So anyway, I think that's an interesting question to try to solve.
And it's something that, like I said, I've struggled with because I realized it, and I'm the only white person working on this. So I try to step back and try to see it another way, and as many ways as I can. But for example, so this is the first week and the first day, and every single day has multiple options. So so you can choose, and obviously it's still going to be stuff that most people of color have heard at some point or another. But like a lot of people, this redlined thing was amazing. I got so many comments on that. And I can share with you too, my prompt, it's super simple, it's super basic, it's the same every week. I even give them sentence frames. I'm like, all I want you guys to do is actually pay attention and tell me something you got out of this week. And then we've really tried hard to center authors and scholars of color, and as much as we can, wherever we can. We've had our own fun situation with the police here. And so we actually made national news with our situation. So, what we did this time is intentionally, we started, the first thing each week was a broader explanation of the issue. And then we did a local example. And then the third day is always something like where we're trying to get them to actually engage in some sort of activism and to reflect. So, yeah. And I feel like this fits in both my classes. I teach college success studies, which I think if we're going to be successful, we need to understand how to interact with humans who have different lived experiences than ourselves. And it has sparked some really good conversations in both classes. So yeah, so we are actually, we have one more week left, so it's not up yet, but anyone can access this. And we would love for people to be using it. And also most of it came from Greater Cleveland YMCA or YWCA. So we borrow liberally from them. But yeah, so I can.
Yeah, I've had a chance to go through it.
Yeah.
I've had a chance to go through it. It's really good. And they present so many great activities and videos and articles that you can scale at any level, whether it's 21 days or if it's, smaller. So it's really a great tool. So I appreciate Rosemary's work in that area, because I think it will serve us all. And again, it's just really well done. So I encourage you to take a look at it, and even do the 21-day challenge if you can, if you have the time to be able to do it again. So thank you. Any other questions? Let's see, for Rosemary. No? All right, let me see if I can find my the presentation again. Sorry. Rosemary, do you have it up again? Do you still have it open? Can you share your screen and I'll just go through it? You're muted. Thank you. Yeah. So really quickly, we'll talk about our pathways at Santa Ana College and our structure. I'll talk a little bit about my own dissertation and what I've learned over the past 3 years in terms of working with Latinx students, and then some strategies that we have begun engaging with at Santa Ana College. So next slide, please. So for most of you, we have our center is a Center for Teacher Education. It's housed in counseling. I'm a counseling faculty member. I'm not an education faculty member. And so we've had a center that has supported students who want to become teachers, kind of like a transfer center, but very specific for aspiring teachers. And we surround them with support as well as pre-professional development in a lot of different areas to help them. An example of textbooks, we hate textbooks too, but students it's been a cost for students with textbooks. So we've actually used a lot of our grant funds in previous years to actually buy textbooks to let them borrow. But now we've encouraged a lot of our faculty members to go to OER, which they are happily doing. And slowly but surely we are getting, thankfully, out of the work of having to provide textbooks, particularly how it's difficult in this COVID situation. But we just do a lot of orientation to the teaching profession. We do a lot of counseling and advising, because again, it's in the counseling center in terms of helping students understand the different pathways and credentialing requirements and all those kinds of things. In other times, we'll be doing field trips to universities and even to places where students can get information that they would bring their students, whether it's our planetarium on campus or the Museum of Tolerance or the Discovery Science Center or other places in our community that they can use as tools to help them teach. We have our annual Road to Teaching conference that is happening simultaneously right now with this conference, and hopefully you'll join us later today and this weekend. Your students are. So a lot of different things. So we have a physical center on campus. Now it's a virtual center in cyberspace. So next slide, please. Our academic pathways we've built out in the 20 years that I've been there. We were primarily child development when we first started, and now we have both child development, educational studies, and we now have 2 full-time faculty members in educational studies, Dr. Ponioka and Dr. Kimmel. They are actually, I call them unicorns because they have backgrounds both in K-12 and doctorates in educational leadership and curriculum and development, but they also have backgrounds in child development. They have master's degrees in child development. So they can serve both in both areas. And so I think that gives really a strong pipeline for our students. But we also have ECE faculty in Michelle Hardy and Chantel, who's really their focus is on our early childhood program. So we have degrees in child development, and we also have these degrees in education. One is our local elementary ed pre-professional AA degree. And then the second one is the associate degree for transfer, as many of us have. And then we've created certificates as well for students who want to work in after school programs or extended learning programs. And then our newest certificate is actually this secondary education pre-professional certificate. We're trying to identify students who want to become high school teachers and providing them with an academic pathway at our college. So we just got that approved through our curriculum council like this month, and it'll be in the catalog next year. Next slide, please. And then just in terms of, understanding, this work for myself, I've been doing this work as a counselor for 20 years and hearing the stories and assisting the students and helping with the ed plans and watching it play out, as a faculty member. But as a scholar, I really wanted to research it and study it in a number of different ways to really, and also document it for all of us so that we can use this as a resource. And my study was really as a qualitative study looking at the experience of K-12 teachers who begin in community college, and I asked them what were the factors that led to your success. In all different areas related to professors, counselors, programs, and they shared some important things and that we all need to know, and I think we've already talked about already. As one is it's the people, right? So having quality faculty members who understand this work and understand the needs of our students, both as teachers in the classroom and also counselors, is really critically important. They 100% identify the people or the individuals who help propel them forward, but they also identify the people from their own experiences who have not been supportive, who have hindered their success, who have not cared about them or not valued them as students. So that's also equally important, that we kind of root out those individuals, but understand that's the experience of our students. They come out of an educational system that they've been kind of beat up by in a lot of the different ways because it's not meant for them. And so we have to help them navigate higher education in a way to help them become educators that can transform the system. They talked about their programs, how much their programs impacted them, whether it's the staff members or the services or their pre-professional development, the field work, the specialized counselors, and the programs. As Rosemary was talking about, the connections with Cal Poly and the alignment of our programs are really important for our students because they provide a lot of support and that straight pathway. It less complicates things. And one of the third question I asked students is, what role did hope play in your program, in your success? And it's really interesting that it actually played across the whole experience. So even their decision to become a teacher, they talked about their K-12 experiences. They talk about teachers who inspired hope in them, but they also talked about educational experiences that removed hope, right? Whether they were a bilingual student and there was no support for them in the classroom, that they were an undocumented student and their teachers didn't really understand what that was and didn't really invest in them because they knew they were undocumented. But there were a lot of teachers that provided that support and hope to teachers. And that's why they want to become teachers, to share that hope with others. And so Dr. Duncan Andrade talks about that in his article, Growing Roses Out of Concrete, that taking these individuals who have come out of the urban areas and they become teachers and scholars and returning them back into these communities as educators helps destroy the concrete and grow rose gardens in those areas. And so I think that's really important that we understand that part of our students, because everything that we do, whether it's building that agency, that motivation in the classroom with them and their desire to become a teacher, to providing the pathway support for them, all leads to those things that promote hope. So the last slide here I'll share, and then we can pull up and talk for the next few minutes is next 20 minutes I think we have. our guided pathways, we've organized into future educators. So we have a group now of majors that are centered around this current academic pathway called Guided Future Educators with a Success Team. And we're trying to use equity work to really provide the support that students need in this smaller community on our college, and kind of bring them all into the fold. And then something else that I did is, like I shared earlier in the an earlier session I was doing, is that I really wanted to get into this work with students this summer, even virtually, to begin having conversations with students about social inequality, about implicit bias, about anti-Black racism in schools, and how do we deal with that as educators. And so I created this critical conversation series, and I invited 15 or so of students that I knew from their leadership areas at our college through Club Apple and SATA, and in my advising with them. And we had 4 sessions that we had them each week, and they were around these 4 topics here. We started like it was a mini 21-day equity challenge, but it was a 4-week equity challenge with some students, and we kind of walked through all this. And my staff did the same thing. So it was our idea is really to begin these conversations with our students, to have them begin talking about their experiences and labeling their experiences for the most part. And then at the end, I brought in a teacher, a former SAC student who's now a teacher, to talk about how she's putting these practices, in her everyday classroom, and even what she experiences as a Latinx teacher in a predominantly white school district, and how that impacts her, and the eye rolling that she sees in professional development, the scoffing at some of the this work around critical race theory that she's trying to bring into her work. So it was really an eye opener for us and the students to have this type of discussion. So my goal is to hopefully broaden this out to more students and bring more students into this, to have these conversations with students. So that's what at Seneca College, what we're doing in terms of trying to really shift the tide and put more energy and emphasis on this work programmatically. So I'm happy to take questions, and then actually obviously open it up to to everybody sharing kind of what you're doing, what your ideas might be, and how you might be bringing this work into your own programs. I think there's a next slide. Do we have questions on the next slide, Rosemary? Yeah, there we go.
How do you format your critical conversations? Like, are you doing an hour, 2 hours? Have you found a certain time of day and format that works for people? I'm just curious about your scheduling.
Sure, yeah, I did it one time, and it was in the summertime, so it wasn't really a good time. But the 15 students I invited to participate, I think I got maybe between 5 and 7 each time. So we had 2 students who stayed the entire for all 4, because we wanted to be a 4 series, but we had other students kind of dropping in, which I felt was okay. I mean, we're just kind of putting it out there. I did it on a Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock because it seemed like an okay time. Again, we're just kind of piloting it and seeing how it went. And then my staff and I put together the 4 different workshops, or different hour, I think it's an hour or 90 minutes that we put together. And we had some homework, some assignments that we wanted them to do, some videos we wanted them to watch, maybe some brief readings that we wanted them to do. And then we created questions that we had basically in response. What did you learn from, just like the keynote this morning, right? What did you learn from hearing? One of them was actually Dr. Regina Steinbach-Stroud, another talk that she did. And we shared, we talked about that, and we just kind of, provided that opportunity for dialogue. And I actually then, at the very first session, asked them to confirm the rest of the agenda. Like I put this is what I was thinking to do, how to do it, and did people have any ideas about what else they wanted to talk about? And so in our first session, we actually came to some agreements on what else we would want to talk about. I think they want to talk about definitions, like of specific terms, so that we're all talking about the same thing. So one session, we put together a whole bunch of definitions so that everyone knew what racism was, white supremacy was, critical consciousness was. So we kind of created that whole list for everybody to have. So it was really a pilot. I haven't done it a second time, but I think I think just trying it was, for me, powerful, because it gave us all a chance to have these conversations.
And this wasn't part of a class, right? You did this, you offered this to all students who just wanted to join you for enrichment. That's awesome.
Right. Yeah, I basically intentionally invited students that I knew, because doing it in a virtual space, I think we brought that up in the other ones. Like, some of you have to build some trust and connection. So I chose students that I actually knew, or my staff knew, because they were, actively involved in our program. And so that was the safe space I think we tried to create first, and then we were going to think about how we would broaden this to everybody. And we even asked the students at our last session, how would you broaden this to everybody?
Something that one of my students did, and like without being prompted, she was interested in doing this. She kind of developed a community of practice within our Ed 200 class. And it hasn't really taken off as much as I think she'd like it to, but there are 3 or 4 people every week who get together to have a conversation about something that matters to them. And in this online space, one of the things I learned coercively, because I had to, was looking into meaningful and effective online pedagogy. And you won't be surprised to learn that it shares a lot of elements with culturally responsive pedagogy. And there was an article that we read for our project about that. And one of the things about both of those is co-creation of the curriculum between the students and the teacher. I almost said facilitator, because that's really the mindset I try to take into this. And so when my student asked me about that, I said, because he's like, what if we did a book club, or we could watch, see a movie and then just talk about it? I'm all, you're describing a community of practice. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we seek. That's what we're doing right now, where we look at what matters to the people in the room. Let's talk about it. So I love the critical conversations that Steve's facilitating. And there's a lot of resources out there for us. And I firmly believe, based on what I've found in the literature I've looked at, that the way that we can have an impact on our campus is through cultural change. And that cultural change isn't something that the president just dictates. It's something that has to come through practice and habit and buy-in of the community. And getting together to talk about these hard things, or these either for white people to talk about race and our complicity in it, or for students who are experiencing challenges and bullying, or whatever the topic that's important at that time. Facilitating these conversations has everything to do with education and teacher preparation, because as educators, we need to be watching for what our students need. And there is a lot to learn by having these conversations. No, there's not a standardized test to check what you learned, but if our objective is to turn out teachers who are more effective and more inclusive and more aware of their students' value, then we can model that by facilitating these conversations, and kind of, again, establishing the expectation of, we don't just look at something in a book and take it at face value. We look at it, we think about it, we talk about it. And so kind of establishing that, that lunchroom chat that you might have in a school, if you have a lounge, which I never did, but I told you didn't want to let me do this. There we go, back to that.
What are others doing?
I can share a little. So this is my second year at PCC, and I think one of the things that's important about my context is that, excuse me, I'm the only education faculty, but we're starting to really hopefully build some collaboration across education and child development, which I think is going to help with some of the challenges. But in terms of curriculum, what I've tried to do in my Education 13 class, which is the Intro to Elementary Teaching, is think of my class as like 3 big chunks. So the first piece of it, which is about 4 or 5 weeks long, is about really looking at what does the current context look like? What are the standards for the different content areas? And there's a theme throughout it, which we're looking at, issues of race and class and gender and all of it through it. So what's missing in the history standards, whose stories are being portrayed, those sort of questions. The second chunk of it is really examining student diversity. And I still haven't found a way to do it in an intersectional way, other than me talking about how it's intersectional, but I still do, focus on students of color, students cross-gender and sexuality, students that are emergent bilinguals, and then students with diverse abilities. And then the third chunk is curriculum design. And my hope is that they'll take all of kind of what we've explored in the class and start to really design understanding by design units that focus on student diversity and focus on project-based learning, some of the things that we've explored. And so far it's been good. I've been seeing units that directly have an equity focus to them. And so I'm continuously working on my building of the curriculum for that class and the other classes, and like all of us in here had to turn it into a virtual platform. I think some of my challenges are more programmatic. So like I'm trying to do quite a bit because I'm also the coordinator for the program. I'm trying to do quite a bit for PCC students. So like doing virtual events and doing CBEST workshops, et cetera. But I haven't, now I'm thinking, how do I start to build with folks like yourself, or how do I start to build with Cal States and some of the other important stakeholders so that I can eventually grow the program. And so I'm super interested in what both of you are doing. And Steve, I'm always looking at your website to kind of get a sense of like, okay, this is what a program looks like built out, right? So I'm just curious about that, like some of, just learning from you all, like how to build, and eventually I'm going to build it so it's not sustainable just for myself to do the coordinating and the teaching of the courses. So curious about how you collaborate across counselors and the educator as well. But yeah, just kind of sharing where I'm at.
Yeah, it's a lot of heavy lifting. When you're a one-person show trying to do it all, it's quite a bit. So just, yeah, I encourage you just to really try to figure out one thing at a time. Particularly trying to do all this also in a virtual environment makes it a bit more taxing for everybody too. But you're doing really great work. PCC has an amazing reputation as a institution in your program as well. So I don't think building relationships isn't hard. It's just how much you open the floodgates to having that work begin and being able to contain it all at the same time. So yeah, and maybe even aligning partners, bringing your university partners in to help with some of this work, asking them to volunteer their time to do some of these critical conversations with students. They would organize it and they'd also learn about the program at whatever it is, Cal State LA or wherever they would be transferring to. And then you're building a bridge, so getting a 2-for-1. So you're getting them to help do some of this work, but also building relationship as well. So that might be something to do. But yeah, it's a challenge.
And if I can maybe ask a more pointed question as well. So PCC has an interesting demographics where we have students from different backgrounds. It's predominantly Latinx, but we also have quite a bit of middle-class white students who attend, Asian students, a smaller population of Black students. Something I'm trying to really think through is that some of the students who are coming to some of our sessions, the students who are applying to particular internship opportunities that we have or scholarships tend to be the middle-class white students, right? And so I'm just interested in how you all try to really outreach to students of color, men of color, and build that particular demographic in your teacher ed programs.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, we have had, that is top of concern for me and my academic success coach. And in fact, we were just approached by Pomona. Well, we've been working with Pomona to try to make a degree completion program. And the design of their program just didn't sound like it would work for our students that we want to focus on. And we were concerned that it would serve our students, but not the ones that we were trying to really provide that space for. And so I have found that having that bilingual academic success coach who is right there and in the community with these young people, a lot of them are young people. She knows, because I don't travel I'm not in that community myself. And so she knows, like, she has some good outreach skills and strategies, and her network is very strong. And for example, when we ran that conference that we just had, I really stepped back to see, like, what did she think was going to be relevant for the students. And so we intentionally are reaching out in the communities, offering bilingual speakers and programming, teaming up with the college for different programs, and trying to bring in bilingual speakers, so people who are performing their work in Spanish as well as English. And again, offering, like Steve was saying, we pay for their textbooks, and really reaching out into the communities, providing these career information nights to let people know that, we're a stepping stone to their teaching degree. And then also really, Cal Poly is literally across the highway, and I also work there. And so I'm kind of the mole that goes back and forth between the programs, and we engage a lot with the faculty over there as well, who are guest speakers. And silver lining to COVID, is that we're in this virtual space, and having guest speakers now just got a whole lot easier. So you really diving into the community that we're hoping to serve and finding out what their needs are. Our speaker at our conference was a woman who is an elementary school teacher, but who grew up helping her parents as farm worker, and talking about that and talking about her journey. And so many of our students and potential students really identified with that. So that's
Thank you.
what we do.
I thought I might chime into that conversation if you all don't mind. So again, I'm at Santiago Canyon College. I'm an adjunct counselor there. And in regards to men of color, we actually started a program focusing on men of color, our students who identify as male. That was like one of the big things when I kind of got this program to be kind of back alive again, prior to the previous person that was doing it. And so what I did was workshops. So I believe it was I think it was 2 times a month when I was over the program about a year ago, that I would have students that were interested in being part of this program, because and that's how we kind of promoted it. We promoted it as a program, not as a club. So that was something that was really big in letting our students know it's not a club, it's a program. We have specific workshops. Food was a big thing. We, trying to get students to come, it can be very difficult, especially, with just any students, but especially male students. It wasn't easy. On average, I would say I would have about 5 students come, and then we had our certain students that were pretty consistent. But what I did with the students was I would talk about, teacher prep, what the pathway was for that. And then I would have guest speakers, because one of the things that I think our Pathways to Teaching program, we're all a whole bunch of women. Fortunately, we're a group of diverse women, but we're all a whole bunch of women. So we kind of had to check our privilege there. And that was one of the things that I didn't want to kind of insert myself. So I made sure I brought male speakers that worked in education. I got a lot of male speakers from the local high schools. And then another thing that we're continuing to work on, and that we've done a little bit with, is work with Cal State Fullerton, so our local Cal State, with their Men of Color of Education program. So the current person who's over the program now, she has had some students go to some of their events and things like that. So that's one way, at least, we've been trying to diversify the field in K through 12 with men of color. And one of the things I've noticed, especially this past like year, is we are having more males that are interested in elementary school teaching, which has been amazing. So I definitely look forward when we do get back face to face so we can continue to work on that more. But just to let you all know what we've been doing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Talaya, for sharing that. That's great work. Yeah, food. When we had the capacity to be able to, bring them together in the same space. So good job. And I know there's a lot of virtual things that are happening now that I'm seeing that we're inviting our students to as well, taking advantage of the programs that have strong men of color programs and inviting them to join in as well. We are winding down. We are at 1:15, which is the end of our time. We really appreciate everyone sharing and coming and contributing and listening. And then we would encourage you, if you can, to do the evaluation for this session. We have a slide, or all the workshops are on the same evaluation URL. And then, yeah, there it is. And then I think in 5 minutes, we will be joining again for the closing speaker. So again, appreciate everybody's time and good meeting at you all. And thank you, Rosemarie. And we appreciate it. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm going to head to the Academic Senate now. So
all right, good luck.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. Good luck with the conference. Yeah, thank you.
May the force be with you. All right. Okay, good luck.
Okay, bye-bye.